G'day, my name is Be Asian Dad and we're going to look into this Lenovo ThinkPad X13 Yoga Gen 2. It's a 13-inch convertible business laptop. Now what the Yoga means, it is a 2-in-1. And what does 2-in-1 do? You can pretty much flip its screen around and then convert to a tablet. So you can then do some drawings. Now what's really nice about the Yogas is it also on one of the sides is you've also got a digital pen included that's garaged into the leg, so you don't have this as magnetic. It is actually part of the laptop itself, which is absolutely great, so you won't be losing this. And then of course you can then just do your drawings, markups, or whatever you fancy what you can do with a digital pen. So it's good. Now when it is garaged into the notebook, it is recharging the batteries on the digital pen, so you don't need to worry about batteries on that digital pen. And I will be performing the jitter test later on in the video. Now we'll also be looking at the temperatures and fan noise of this computer, as well as the features of this computer, and we also look at the internals a little bit later on as well. Now we'll also be putting timestamps along this video so you can skip to the different sections just to make life easier and also save you a bit of time. Now first off, let's start off with what this computer can be configured with. Now, with the processor wise, it is using the 11th gen Intel core, and you can either get an i5 or an i7. Now they both are 4 cores. As for RAM wise, it can go up to a maximum capacity of 32 gigs. Now this is an improvement from the previous year, which can go only up to a maximum of 16 gigs. So that's a welcome change because we can now do a little bit more content creation, as well as hitting some of the more professional applications that requires more memory. Now you also need to make sure you select the correct amount of RAM because you can't upgrade it later because it is soldered to the system board. And as for the storage wise, it has 1 slot of M.2 NVMe for SSD. And for graphics wise, it has just the Intel integrated graphics, which is the Intel Iris Xe, which does pretty well from what my test is from the whole year. As for the display wise, this is a big improvement from the previous year. It now houses the new display that has an aspect ratio of 16:10, which means we got more screen real estate. Yeah! And there are now 3 options for the display. So there is a 300 nit brightness version, and there is also a 500 nit brightness version which has privacy guard, which means it limits the viewing angle to about 70%, so you don't have prying eyes from the sides seeing what your data or what you're working on your screen, which is great when you're in public transport or when your data is sensitive. And there is also a 2K version, which is 400 nit of brightness. Now, of course, it's got Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2. As for the webcam, it still has a 720p webcam on top. I do wish that Lenovo gives an option to actually upgrade the webcam to a 1080p webcam like they did with the Lenovo X13 Gen 2, but basically the non-Yoga version of that, it actually has an option for that. This one, the Yoga version, does not have the option. So please, Lenovo, give us the option for that. I can see you can do it. So just make it easier for us for more content creation and also video conferencing as well too. Now, the 720p webcam does house privacy shutter, so it's just a matter of a little flick of a switch and you'll see a physical shutter that goes over the lens, and it will actually go red just so you actually indicate that there's something covering the lens. So even if it accidentally turns on, at least all they hear is a physical thing that's covering it in a way. So you don't need the electrical tape or blue tack anymore. Great. This is a recording from the 720p webcam from the X13 Yoga Gen 2. This is the video and audio unedited so you can hear and see what the quality is like. And as always with this test, I've got 2 top lights turned on. I've got my 1 studio light turned on, and I've also have the downlights in this room turned on as well. So I'm going to turn off my 1 studio light off, and you'll hopefully see this adjust. Now I've got 2 downlights in front of me and 2 downlights behind me. The 2 downlights in front of me is a bit far away, so there's actually not much light hitting on my face. So this is what I would consider a dark or night environment. Now, if you're in an office environment, you should actually get better light than what I am currently in right now. So I'm going to turn my 1 studio light back on, and of course, usually with better light gives you better picture. So I'd definitely love to hear what your thoughts are of this 720p webcam. Let's have a little ports. Starting on the left hand side of the computer, we've got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. So they're USB type C, and they both support power delivery, and you can connect docking stations to these 2 ports as well. And then we've got full size HDMI port, which is version 2.0, and then we got a USB type A port, and that is USB 3.2 Gen 1, and that also supports power sharing. And then we have the optional smart card reader. And looking at the back of the computer, we just have the exhaust vent. Looking at the right hand side of the computer, we've got the Garage Pen, which is the Lenovo Pen Pro, and then we have the headphone jack, and then we got another USB Type A port, which is USB 3.2 Gen 1, and then we got the security lock slot. Comparing the Gen 2 ports with the X13 Gen 1 ports, with the removal of the CS port, that's not much of a problem, but removing the micro SD card reader, it's a bit of a bummer, because one of my top tips I give people is for a cheap storage upgrade, you can actually buy a micro SD card event slotted into the micro SD card for slow storage. So it's good for if you need things that don't need fast storage. That's a nice placement, and it will be flushed off the computer rather than have a USB stick sticking out all the time, which can actually harm the USB stick or damage the computer. So I like to see Lenovo bring back the micro SD card slot. There are two speakers located on either side of the bottom of the laptop, and when I tested the maximum volume of the speakers, it managed to measure in at a peak of 81.7 decibel. So it's pretty much the same volume level as our iPad Pro, just to give you a bit of reference point there. As for the sound quality of the speakers, I find the clarity is a bit average. Now, as for this bass, it does have a bit of bass, not a crazy amount, just a little bit, just enough there. And its strongs are definitely in its mids. Now, as for the highs, it does distort a little bit when it's bring up to the maximum volume on its highs. Now, as for being balanced, it still is pretty strong in the mids you'll hear. Now, as for the acoustic wise, it's pretty much straight to the front and a little bit to the side. I did compare the X13 Yoga Gen 2 with the X13 Gen 2, the non-Yoga version. And I did find that the Yoga version does have better speakers than the non-Yoga version. So I definitely see that they've actually tried to improve on the speakers on this Yoga Gen 2. So I think I've still got to give them good credit, at least they're trying, and they're moving sort of to a better directions. We've got the Lenovo X13 Gen 2 on the left, and we've got the Lenovo X13 Yoga Gen 2 on the right. So I'm just going to start off the speaker test. The X13 Yoga Gen 2 does come with a 65 watt power adapter, and it's a little bit larger than my palm size, so it's still quite small, and it charges the computer via the USB-C port. The battery in the X13 Yoga Gen 2 is a 52.8 watt hour battery, and it does support rapid charge, which means you can charge the battery from 0 to 80% in 1 hour's time. And I did perform my battery life test on the computer, and I tested my 5 different modes. Now this one I've got is an i5 version. So when I put it in my best performance mode, it managed to get 2 hours. And in better performance mode, it managed to get 2 hours as well. And in better battery life mode, it managed to get 4 hours and 15. And in battery saving mode, it managed to get 6 hours and 10. And in my media mode, it managed to get 10 hours and 30 minutes. So it's pretty decent amount of battery. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer out there that my battery life test, it does put a consistent workload across all the system resources. So you should actually get better numbers than what I would, because most applications won't hit the system resources consistently. It only does on and off. So you should actually get better numbers than what I do. I'm just trying to give you some worst case scenario situation. The weight of a Lenovo ThinkPad X13 Yoga Gen 2 is 1.2 kilos. Add in the 65 watt power adapter, becomes a total weight of 1.57 kilos that you'll be carrying around with you. As for the temperatures and fan noise of this computer, when I put this computer on load, I found most of the heat is concentrated near the top center of the keyboard, around about where the Y key is. That's unsurprising because that's where the processor sits. And also the top right of the keyboard around about the F11 key. Now that's unsurprising because that's where the exhaust is located as well. Now when I took my measurement, my ambient temperature was 19 degrees Celsius and my ambient noise was 37 decibels. So I took my base measurement when the computer was on idle, and the hottest area of the keyboard measured in at 30 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan noise, hit a maximum of 37 decibels, so still practically quiet. Then I put the computer on 20% load, so that's average use, like tasks like office productivity work, surfing the web, and streaming videos. And the maximum temperature on the keyboard measured in at 34 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan, hit a maximum of 38 decibels. Then I put the computer on 50% load, and the maximum temperature on the keyboard was 41 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan noise, stayed at 38 decibels. Then I put the computer at 100% load, and the maximum temperature on the keyboard measured in at 49 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan, hit a maximum of 41 decibels. Now I also measure the bottom back cover of the computer, and the hottest area measured in at 46 degrees Celsius. And as for the fan noise, stayed at 41 decibels. I also measured the computer when it was in tablet mode, and the display side, the hottest area measured in at 30 degrees Celsius. And as for fan noise, it went down to 38 decibels. And on the keyboard side, its hottest area measured in at 39 degrees Celsius. And of course, the fan noise was still at 38 decibels. Comparing the temperatures of the X13 Yoga Gen 2 with the Yoga Gen 1, I can definitely see that there's made improvements on the temperatures. It does run cooler. As for fans, it's about the same, but definitely runs cooler. Now, I think it's more than likely to do with the actual 11th gen Intel Core that runs a little bit cooler, which is great to see. So around about 30 to 50% load, it still does heat up a little bit, but it still heats up less than the Generation 1. Looking at the stability performance of the X13 Yoga Gen 2. Now this particular unit is configured with an i5 1145G7. And looking on the Intel website, it says that it has a base clock speed of 2.6 gigahertz when it's running at 28 watts TDP, and it can throttle all the way down to about 1.1 gigahertz at 12 watts DDP. So this is the base clock speeds here. So we want to actually see this go above that, and it has a maximum turbo boost speed of 4.4 gigahertz. So I've had this computer running on 100% load for the last 3 hours. So that's the processor, memory, and also the disk. And we can see that the actual speed of the processor is anywhere between 2.4 to about 2.7 gigahertz. Mostly, I would say an average of about 2.5 gigahertz. And that's pretty stable there, which means it is above, which means it is just staying at the high base clock speed, and it is actually running quite cool for this sort of type of temperatures. It's running around about 65 to about 70 degrees Celsius. So it actually has plenty of room to go up higher, but it is only just pretty much staying around about this sort of level at its base clock speed. I have this computer connected to mains power, and it is set to best performance mode as well too. So let's have a little behavior of the processor to see how long it's able to maintain a high turbo boost for. So this one I've got is an i5 1145G7, and it has a maximum turbo boost of 4.4 gigahertz. So I'm going to put this computer on 100% load now, and I also have this computer connected to mains power, and it is still set to best performance. So I'm going to start the load, and I'm just going to start the clock watch now, and we can see we've gone up to about 4 gigahertz here. And we can definitely see the temperatures have shot straight up to about 80 degrees Celsius. And it's stuck at 3.9 to 3.8 gigahertz at the moment. Bringing itself back up to about 4 gigahertz. And at 30 seconds mark, it's pretty much around about 3.7 gigahertz. And now we're approaching the 2-minute mark, and it ranges anywhere between about 3.1 to about 3.6 gigahertz for the speed of the processor. So still doing pretty well. Now, it's approaching about the 3-minute mark. We're starting to get an average of around about 3 to about 3.1 gigahertz. So it's starting to drop down here now. After about 4 minutes, we're around about 2.7 to about 3 gigahertz is what we're looking at, averaging around about 2.8 gigahertz. About 4 minutes and 45, we're starting to pretty much settle down to about our base clock speed for this particular processor, this i5. And it does go a little bit dropping below, but it's also able to actually bring itself back up to about 2.6 gigahertz. They will fluctuate anywhere between 2.3 to about 2.6 gigahertz, which is what we'll get for our stability. So it's pretty much settled there at about 5-minute mark. I did perform the benchmarks for this particular X13 Yoga Gen 2. Now this one is configured with an i5 1145G7 with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 SSD. I'll put up the scores for PassMark, Citybench R23, PCMark, 3DMark, MATLAB 2020B, Fusion Photoshop, Geekbench 5, and SpecView Pref. Let's have the keyboard now. For those that follow my channel, know that I love ThinkPad keyboards, and this is no exception. This is still a good keyboard. Now it has good key travel on each individual key, is quite smooth for the texture, and it's a little bit smaller than your T series, but the X series is still a decent size. Has okay spacing in between. Now it still has a little bit of concave shape to each individual key as well, and you can get it configured with backlight. Now some people may find that they don't have it with backlight. You just need to make sure you get that configured with when you purchase the computer, or check your reseller there. Now to actually engage the backlight, it is function spacebar, and there are 3 settings, which is off, low, and high. And as for the power button, it is located on the very right hand side of the keyboard. Now that has been changed from the previous model, which used to be on the right hand side, which I would have preferred, but they've now moved it in. And it does have a fingerprint scanner built into the power button as well. In the middle of the keyboard is still the track point, or what I would call it the G spot, just because of where it's located at. And below the spacebar has the 3 mouse buttons to support that track point. And as for the trackpad, it is still a very decent size for a 13-inch computer, and it still has a very nice silky smooth texture to the trackpad, and it is still mechanical, so it is hinge at the top, and you can depress it on the bottom here, and it does register quite well and being responsive. Now I also tested when my hands were moist, as well as with disposable gloves, so that registered no problems at all. Now as for the palm rest, it is a little bit more rougher than the previous model. This one's a little bit more prone to fingerprints, which is great, so you don't have to be constantly wiping. So the material they've used for this 2021 model is definitely a lot better. Now while we're going to the material, before I go into material, you have a good ample spacing when you use your palm rest on here, and I do have a bit smaller hands, but still it's decent. I'm not really cutting on my palm when I'm resting on doing some typing on the palm rest. And as for the build quality, this is a magnesium carbon fiber alloy, and it's actually quite sturdy. As you can see, it doesn't flex too much. And as for the keyboard, it's actually quite stiff. It's actually quite stiff there as well too, so you can see. Now these are quite durable computers. They are built for business, so these are very, very durable computers. You can pretty much chuck these around, but I wouldn't say you should chuck these around, but these are built at military grade. The hinge is quite clampy, so you do need to use 2 fingers, as you'll see. As one finger test, you'll probably see it'll just clamp all the way through, so you need to actually use 2 hands to open this up. Now once you get to about the 120 degree level, it does disengage the keyboard, so you don't accidentally press on anything when you're in tablet mode. Now also, when you're in tablet mode, the power button does not work, and it does not put the computer to sleep. as you can see. So from here, so it does not, I'm just pressing it, it does not put the computer to sleep. And I've got to say, in economic wise, it's still quite a nice computer, even for writing. As you'll see from my unboxing, I do have some reserve thoughts about where the exhaust is located for a righty, but if you're a lefty, you won't have any issues there at all. Let's have a quick look at the internals of the X13 Yoga Gen 2. Now first, straight off, we'll just have a quick look at the down here. This is where the GarageBand lives. So this is where it normally sits. Just to let you know, it is got a connector here to charge the GarageBand. And of course you need to remove this before you actually take the bottom back cover off. Now here is the 52 watt-hour battery, and it is held in by 5 screws, and I've pre-undone them just to speed up time, and I'll just lift this battery up just for those who are interested in what's underneath the battery. And we've got the CMOS battery living right on the left hand side of here, and it is connected to this connector here, so you don't need to take this battery out to disconnect it. You can just disconnect it from this little connector here if you need having CMOS battery issues. And then on the right hand side of it, underneath this heat padded shield is, I'll just slide this out, it is held by a screw, I've just undone that one as well too, is the M.2 SSD. So it's really cool that Lenovo actually put this with heat padding, so that's nice. And then on the right hand side of here is the processor, lives underneath here, and there's a fair bit of thermal material to try and help out with the heat. And on the left hand side of the system fan is another slot here for the WAN. Now I don't have this one configured in here, but this is where it would normally sit. With the display, you'll find it has quite narrow bezels on the sides, and on the top and bottom bezels, it's not too bad. It's still quite narrow, but you do find that there is a black border all around the display. Now that is because with the Yoga, it's just as a safety precaution when you overhang, when you hold this in tablet mode, and it just sort of stops it from accidentally engaging on the screen and providing commands to the display when you're in tablet mode. I have tested this computer for PWM, and I'm happy to say it does not have PWM. The display in this particular unit is the 300 nit brightness, and when I tested it out outdoors, it still did alright in a shaded area, so you can still do your presentation at your local coffee shop. Measuring the color gamut coverage of the display, it measured in at 95.7% sRGB coverage, 72% Adobe RGB coverage, and 75.5% DCI-P3 coverage. I'm going to do the jitter test here, or the line test. So I'm just going to do my diagonal lines now. So I'm just going to put one palm down, and I'm going to do my best to do some straight lines diagonally. That's not bad. I'm going to bring in a ruler in, and I'm just going to put one palm down at the start to see how it goes. Now I'm also going to include a second touch as well with my other hand, as well as having my palm on the screen. Doesn't look like it actually affects much having my second hand on the screen itself. Now I'm just going to do some horizontal line quick ones here. Looks like it's doing pretty good. And I will also just to do a quick squiggly to see how the parallax is. It's not too bad at all. And I'm also going to do some spirals. We'll do my best to try and keep it even. I'm not very good at it. So far it's pretty good. And we just do the test of the pen pressure. So that's very light. And now I'm just doing hard, light, hard. So it does do that. And also do some quick writing as well. Overall, the Lenovo ThinkPad X13 Gen 2 is a decent computer. With the upgrades of the display, the speakers, the build quality, the build material as well, and also the temperatures and also the performance, it's definitely overall a great package. And the fact that it also has a GarageBand is definitely a good win. Now, I hope you find this video informative or enjoyed it. If you did, or even to support my channel, smack that like button for me. It does help me out. And if you haven't already, subscribe my channel by hitting the subscribe button on the screen. I do try to upload a new video every week. And just remember, imperfections in life makes it beautiful and interesting. And I'll see you next video.